One thing is missing that will propel you forward. And if you want to know what it is, we're going to do it and check it out all on today's podcast. Let's do it. Your mind is a beautiful thing, but if left unattended, it can get ugly real quick. If you're not constantly curating the content your mind consumes on a daily basis, then your surroundings will dictate your daily thoughts, habits, behaviors, and actions. This show has only one goal: to leave your mind more beautiful than it was when you arrived. Welcome to the Beautiful Mind Show. Hey guys, welcome to today's Beautiful Mind Show. My name is Jason Everett, and with me co-hosting today is Holly Fox. What's going on, Holly? Glad to have you on too.
Hey, thanks for having me. Good to be
I heard
here.
you said it's minus what in Wisconsin today?
It's like -9 right now. Yeah.
Negative
It's,
9. Negative
and that's
9.
without a wind chill, by the way.
Yeah,
So
no,
yeah.
no, thank you. I'm good. I'm good. I'm going to stay here in still sunny and pretty much normal weather outside California. But I want to talk to you guys today. Today we're talking about what's something missing that's propelling you forward, that would propel you forward. If you solve this, if you fixed it, you could move so much faster, so much quicker, and propel yourself, your company, your business, your own personal life to so much more if you got this thing handled. And Holly, you were just talking about this. You just ran a team meeting for your whole staff, and something like shifted for them about what you did. You were talking about it right before we started the show. Talk about what everybody said to you after you did a training. Let's get some context. And by the way, sorry, before I even say that, if you guys have ever been stuck before and felt like you're not making the progress that you want, comment stuck in the chat. I want to know if you guys are experiencing that stuck. Holly, go for it.
Yeah. So we did a team meeting with our entire team. We sat down, we talked about, it was a goal getter meeting. And so we talked about, the first thing we talked about are like the things that they accomplished in 2021. And I mean, like one of the people, they had never even been on an airplane in July. Like they took their first trip in
Yeah, by
July
July of
and
that year, that's the first trip they've ever been on.
yeah, ever flight they'd been on. And they had gone to 5 different places, New York, Florida
Since
twice,
July.
since July. Yeah.
Yeah.
5 times they were on an airplane. Like, I mean, that's pretty crazy. You know,
Yeah.
and just what people went through and did like massive trainings and, you know, accomplished buying new cars. And what they realized is that they came out of, they were like, 2021 kind of sucked. But
Right.
like
Yeah,
after
most
that
people, that was the
meeting,
sentiment, right? 2021.
yeah,
If you thought
yeah.
2021 sucked, type in your real feelings in a word or two in about 2021. Most people are like, it was horrible, it was
Yeah.
terrible, it was a steaming pile of you know what. And people were, people thought 2021 was their worst year on record. And if you would have watched the news, that's what you would assume happened. But that's not what
Exactly.
your team said, even though they went through the same 2021 that we all went through.
Yep.
But these people are having a different experience. Why is that?
Because once they started to write down their accomplishments, so we first started with 5 minutes of what did you achieve in
Mm.
2021? And when they started writing, they were like, holy crap, look what I did. You
Yeah.
know, they just couldn't believe the leaps and bounds that they had created. And it really just made them feel like badasses. Like they were like,
Yeah.
bring on 2022. What I
Yeah,
want to
like
see what's going to
if I
happen.
could have that much growth in a year that everybody thought was a steaming
Yeah.
pile of dog crap, what can I do with this next year?
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Yeah, and I want to talk about this today, Holly, because my wife and I, we just celebrated our oh my gosh, our 14th year anniversary. We both were like, I think it's 13. Then so what we do for our anniversary every year, and by the way, if you've celebrated 14 years or more, you know what's up.
Yep.
It takes a hot minute to get there. That's all I'm saying. And one of the things that happens is every year at the end of the year, because our anniversary is on January 19th. Okay. At the end of the year, we go to dinner. We went to Italy for 2 weeks on our honeymoon. So we go to an Italian restaurant, and we have this little cool Italian drawing book that we open up, and we write down all of our favorite memories from the previous year. And so we write down all the things that we did, the place that we went, the things we did with our kids. Like now, like it all expanded. Our first year, there was like, 8 bullets down on it, Holly. We're like, let's just write some stuff down. Now we fill up like 3 pages, right? For a couple of reasons. Number one is that we like to look back, and the way we do it is we sit down first. And by the way, if this is helpful for you guys, use it on your anniversary. It's an amazing tool. Is what we do is in our minds, while we're having dinner, we just talk about the things we remember from the year. Oh yeah, remember when we went to Hawaii? We took our family to Hawaii. Or remember when we did that? We went to this lake, or we did this thing, or we went hiking with these friends, or we remember that ice cream night we did with like just all the like quick
Mhm.
memories that we have that really stood out to us. And then once we've written down all those quick memories, then we go back and look through our camera roll on both of our phones. And we look
Oh, I
for
like it.
all the things that we had done for the year. We're like, oh, I forgot when we went fishing at the lake and did this. I forgot that we did, and like we're like, that was really fun. And we just write down things that were just good, honest memories that we wanted to capture when we were there, right? And so we write down all those things. And then what we've also recently started to do is write down things like, this will be an important one for later, but we've written down things like, what's the price of gas?
Oh.
Right? We're getting old now, right? So we're like, I
Yeah.
remember when, right? So it's like we write down the price of gas. Well, we write down like we in our book, it's like it says how much money we made this year, what our businesses did, how many employees we had. We write down a couple of stats that are just like milestone markers of what we've accomplished. And it's really fascinating to look at your last year and go, dang, I didn't realize that, our real estate did this well or our business did this well. And like once you take that moment, Holly, to log it and record it somewhere impactful. And I think
Yeah.
that's like the secret sauce of what you're talking about. When you did this training, we did a training called Goal Getter, which was how do you make sure that people set goals properly for
Right.
2022? And you have to start by going through and reviewing 2021, which most people are like, oh, it was a crap year and we didn't do anything, right?
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, you just write down all the things you accomplished, and it becomes this powerful lesson in looking at your past to project yourself to the future. Because Holly, you were saying
Yeah.
a lot of people say don't look into the past, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
don't look backwards, only look forwards. Talk about that for a sec.
Yeah. Well, and I think we hear it a lot of times, like, "Oh, you're not, you're living in the past if you're doing something," or "Don't look back there, that's not where you're going. It's gonna give you anxiety. It's gonna, you're gonna wonder if you could have done something better." And to be honest with you, most of my team would say, "Yeah, I would never look behind me. I'd only wanna look forward." Well,
Right.
looking behind him was the best reward for them that they could have
Mhm.
ever had, and you were talking about it too, is like writing it down. It was that act of actually having a
Yeah.
sheet of paper and a
Right.
pen, writing it down. That really kind of just solidified it for them, like, "Oh, yeah, this really truly happened."
Well, and okay, so this is the thing about it. I think it's the finality of writing it down, or like for me, knowing that it's in this book. And like we were joking
Yep.
about it, is like, it's our 14th year anniversary, right? 14 years married, 22 years as a couple, right? And I was like, dang, do we have another 30 years to write in that book? Like, is that what, like, it was like, do we have enough book left? It was just kind of this fun
Yep.
thing. But like, as we were doing it, like writing it down and knowing that we log it on that time of the year, and it's like this habit and ritual and routine is very rewarding. Cause I think most people that are probably listening to this are like, well, I do some level of review. And Holly, I want to tell you
Right.
this. I had actually said out loud to multiple people how much our business did last year. I have lots of accountability groups. I said, here's how much our business did. Here's how much we've grown. Here's how many employees. Like I've said those things out loud a lot in the last couple of months. But it wasn't really, or last couple of weeks, I should say, because we just ended the year. But it wasn't really until we wrote it down that it felt like it was done. And whether
Yep.
that's on your taxes at the end of the year or on something, there was some level of that being like in the finality of it that was really, really important for me. And I wrote down, and and we wrote it down and we just sat on it for a second and just said, wow, that's a big accomplishment. My wife and I looked at each other and like, it's always funny. My wife's great. Like she's not the biggest, like most dramatic celebrator. I'm dramatic, right? I'm like, ah! Like that's me all the time.
Yeah.
And my wife's like, hey, we should probably celebrate that. Like that's her, right? And she
Yeah.
can get crazy, but that's not her normal MO. She doesn't start crazy. She can get to it, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
came that way. And so uh anyway, so we're sitting down and like I said it and I'm like, "Oh yeah, let's write this down. Here's how much you did as a company or here's whatever." And she's like, she actually stopped and was like, "That's actually a really big deal." Which is always, even if
Right.
that's her like making a big deal about it, right? So she's like, "That was a really big deal." And I'm like, "Yeah, it was. Damn. Yeah." And it just stopped me for a second. I'm like, "It was a really big deal." So I think the other part of it is like step number 1, Holly, is like writing it down.
Yeah,
Right. And if this
for
is helpful
sure.
for you guys, like if you write down your accomplishments somewhere every year, do me a favor and say you write it down in the chat. Or if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, man, I probably should start writing it down, like start. Writing it down is
Mhm.
number 1. The other one is sharing it with important people in your life. Like,
Yes.
obviously, my wife, kind of an important person in my life.
Yeah.
Kind of. And by kind
Yeah.
of, I mean the one. The other thing is like Holly, with your team, when you sat down, those are important people. They work together every single
Yeah.
week for 40 hours a week. Like they're constantly working together, and those are important people in their life. They want to share those goals. So what started to change for them as a mindset as they started sharing those things out loud with that group?
So what we saw a lot of emotion. You know what,
Mm,
honestly, it was like how proud they were, and even some of our newest members of the team were like, I graduated from school, or I got this job, or I did that,
yeah.
it was they were feeling super empowered. And then
Mm,
too is the other people in the group were cheering them on. I mean, it
yeah.
was the cheering and the way to go and the high fives and like the energy. And in fact, we had some people that came in afterwards and they're like, holy cow, I want to have a team meeting like that. That I wish I worked at a place that like people
Yeah.
got that freaking excited for me. And knowing
Mm,
that you have somebody in your corner. Because
yeah.
sometimes it's the people that you work with that are the most powerful.
Yeah, 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 well said. So number 1 is you gotta write it down. Number 2 is you've gotta share it with other people. And I think
Yeah.
number 3, we're gonna get to in just a second. We're talking about kinda how to reset and move forward and kind of let that propel you or catapult you forward in a really big way. But the biggest thing I would say is most people, because they don't look back and celebrate, is they don't end up setting ambitious enough goals afterwards
Yeah.
because they don't feel like this might be a little woo-woo, but, like, they don't feel big enough to set a goal, right? We
Yes.
get beat the crap out of every single day by the world around us, right? Like, I'll tell you, I
Sure.
got beat the crap out of this last week. I had to call the IRS to get a number for something because they didn't send it to me on a form. And I had to call them again. I spent 4.5 hours on the IRS. That beats me down. I had to call for a
Yeah.
doctor's appointment, and the doctor's appointment I had to call 18 times, and I still don't have an appointment. That beats me down, right? Is
Yeah.
like, the bank had to call me for this other thing. I like all these, like, things that are not hard, they're just drama, beat me down. And so I feel small. Like I feel
Yeah.
smaller than I should feel. And the way in which you get yourself to feel bigger than your problems or bigger than your challenges is you start looking at things you accomplish. You're like, I am kind of a badass. Like,
Yeah.
that's a lot of money to earn. Or like, that was a really cool thing that I got that car. I can't believe we moved into this new house. Or, I started that relationship that I've been talking about for the last 5 years that I finally found somebody who likes me and wants to hang out together. Like, whatever it is you write down what you've accomplished and it totally transforms you. So when we come back from this break, we're going to talk about what do you do after you write it down, after you share it with people to get you catapulted forward. We'll be right back after the short break. Stick around. All right. Well, welcome back. That was the shortest commercial on planet Earth. I like it. But that was easy to stick around, right?
Yeah.
So if you're sticking around and you're getting lots of value, would you do me a favor and in the chat, I want you to comment value if you're getting the value that you really want to get out of this. But I want you guys to know this. We're talking about, what's the one thing missing to propel you forward. I think the one thing missing is looking back. I'll talk about this analogy because this happens to me a lot. Holly, I don't know how much you like to hike. I love hiking. I
Yeah.
love going on hikes. I love exploring the mountains. Like it is one of my favorite things to do, whether it's just being close to nature or close to whatever. Like it just is one of my favorite things to do. And
Same,
what I,
Jason. Same.
good. Okay. So we should hang out and hike more.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Okay. So as I hike around, this is kind of the problem that exists, Holly, is that when you're hiking, especially like I like hiking in the mountains. I love hiking in the mountains.
Mhm.
So you hike around and all you can see is you see the trees that are immediately around you usually, and then you see the people around you. And so what starts to happen to your psychology is you start deciding, well, like Holly hikes faster than I do. Look at
Oh
her.
yeah.
Holly's not even panting, and I'm back here going like, right? Like she's got a different pace than I do. Or like you get ahead and you're like, oh, these weak people that are behind me that are just, keeping up. Like you start to compare yourself with those around you. Nobody would ever do that listens to this show,
Yeah.
right? Compare yourself to others, right? But you compare yourself to other people around you and you start
Yeah.
paying attention to only the couple of steps that are in front of you. You're like one foot in front of the other and it starts to get mundane and you're like, yep, another step and another step and another step. But this is the moment that we're talking about right now is when you get to a vista, like you peek out through the mountains just a little bit, and all of a sudden there's a clearing, and you look back. Like one of my favorite places to hike is in Emerald Bay up in Lake Tahoe. Have you ever been there? And Holly, I know you've at least seen Emerald Bay. We've
Yep.
been through there twice now, right? But like
Yep.
Emerald Bay is beautiful. But when you hike through it, you can't really see anything. Then all of a sudden you pop out and you look back and you can see where you started on your hike. And it's so far away, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
man, that would take a long time to drive there in a car. And I just hiked that thing, and it gives you this massive sense of accomplishment, and it encourages you to hike even further. Right? You're like, wow, that was a really long way.
Yeah.
Like, we can keep going. This is amazing. And then you look forward, and again, you disappear into the forest again and go further and occasionally shoot out around the rim and you see some other things. But this is the most important thing I could tell you from a like, how do you set yourself up forward? Is you have to set your goals from the biggest position possible of belief in yourself. Okay. Like, how the hell do you do that? Let's talk about it. Okay. So number one is you have to look back and you have to celebrate every single part of those wins, all the small
Yeah.
wins, the big ones. And, like I've had, I don't have my wristband on today, but I normally have a wristband on that says celebrate all wins. I have a different one on today, but normally I have one that says celebrate all wins. And Holly, that's a big thing, right? Is
Oh,
celebrating wins and
yeah.
acknowledging what you've done and celebrating with other people. Talk to me about how does that help you feel? Like, tell me just about that feeling of like feeling bigger and feeling smaller for you, Holly. What have you experienced on that? And what do you do to make yourself feel bigger? Like
You
not
know,
physically, like, waistline. I
yeah.
mean, I don't want that either, but I'm just saying, like, how do you mentally feel larger than life?
For me personally, um, it when you're talking about the, feeling small, like, I even
Mhm.
notice that, like, I physically do the small thing,
Oh, like
like,
you
in the
contract your
wintertime, like,
body
I do
inward.
this, like, thing, yeah, with my
Mhm.
shoulders and all of
Yeah,
that,
you go inward or
and
you look inside.
Y yeah, for sure. So sometimes it's more physical than it is what I think mentally sometimes, and it comes out that way. So for myself personally, I like to set, benchmarks and small goals when
Mhm.
I'm doing something like this. Like, to your point when you're saying, like, we hike, it's called Devil's Lake, and it's the
Mhm.
same thing where you get up halfway and you can look out over the lake in
Yeah.
Wisconsin, and you're like, "Oh my gosh," like, it's so far to that point, but I for a while there, I would be like, "I just need to get to this point." Like, I need to,
Oh, like you set
I
that
have that, like,
milestone and that marker, and
yeah,
you know when I
yeah.
get there, I'll have accomplished something.
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
for me, it's like then I'm like, "Cool, now I get to go on to the next one, and I get to go on to the next one." And then I celebrate that, which
Mm.
usually is a picture or, something along those lines, but it's the
Yeah.
same with my business. It's like, okay, I tend to break it up and take small bite-sized pieces because I like cake. I'm like we talked about this earlier, like, I'm a dessert person, so it's like
Yeah.
one bite at a time is, how I'm gonna be able to accomplish my goals,
I
and I
love it.
know
Yeah,
that
thanks
if
for
I
bringing up cake. Now I'm
did it
hungry. I
before.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
sorry.
No, it's okay. But like, how do you guys celebrate? What do you do to chunk your time and break it down into smaller, kind of bite-sized pieces? And I was thinking about this, Holly, when you mentioned it, is like, why do they put trail markers along established trails? Right? You're at a mile marker
Yeah,
one, mile marker two, because you can start to track and keep track of where you are, as opposed to I'm just walking aimlessly in the
yeah,
forest. I have no idea how far I've come. And I think sometimes in life, we forget that there's mile markers, right?
right.
So one is celebrating a week, celebrating a month,
Yeah,
and putting a milestone down, celebrating a quarter, celebrating a year. I'll tell you, man, on my annual calendar right back over here on the wall. And like, looking back and saying, what did I do at the end of the year is magical. But I
mm,
also have groups that every 6 weeks we get together and we talk about what we've accomplished in the last 6 weeks, or we get together and say, what have we accomplished for this quarter, and start blocking out that time and just saying like, okay, and because this is the other thing you got to do. I think not only do you have to start chunking it like we were talking about, Holly,
yep,
but you also have to leave your mindset of whatever happened inside that quarter. So again, one of the best
yeah,
business practices, Doug, my business partner, and I have talked about is we close our business out at the beginning and end of every quarter. Well, like we pay ourselves out, we do all that stuff. It's a complete standalone thing that like that quarter we live and die by that quarter, and that quarter sucked. The next quarter can be fantastic. We don't want to carry things over
nice,
from quarter to quarter. So when we sit down, we're like, all right, and that's why we pay our shareholder distributions and all those things out every single quarter for our team, for us, for everything, because we're like, hey, quarter one went this way, quarter two went this way, quarter three went this way. And then we look at the overall year in order to break that down. But there's a reason why people break things down into days, into hours,
yeah,
into weeks, because people actually, we thrive on that ability to break things down. So if you're looking and saying, like, I want to be in the biggest position possible to set goals, and I'm going to set that giant ambitious goal for the year, the very next step after putting yourself in that big minded position and like stretching your context. And by the way, that could be celebrating, could be bragging to others about what you've
Yep.
done, beefing yourself up and like literally feeling larger than life in your mind. This is all in your mind, by the way. This is
Mhm.
not like, like eating a bunch of cake like we talked about. Hungry again. But it's about getting this mindset so your mindset is expansive. Then you set a really big goal. Then the very next thing that you do is you break that goal down. You break it
Yep.
down. Like, if you said, hey, I want to earn $100,000, I want to earn $1,000,000, I want to earn whatever, $10, I don't care what it is. And then say, okay, how do I get there? I was listening to this guy and he was like, how do I make 20 grand in a month? And it's like, well,
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
this is the very first thing. Like, if you don't know this is how I would do it. Can I just show you guys right now? If you guys want to know
Yep.
how to make 20 grand a month, which by the way, when you start making 20 grand a month, it's a life. If you haven't made 20 grand a month yet, it will change your life when you start making 20 grand a month. It is 20, 25 grand. I heard somebody say this the other day. They said all of a sudden you start standing out and you're like, I can't spend all this money. And people are like, I could spend it all. Trust me, Jason. But like you get to a point where all of a sudden money is not as much of an issue for you anymore when you start making that. If you're way far away from $25,000 a month, let's break it down. So $25,000 a month, let's just divide that by 30 days. That means you got to find a way to make $833 a day. $833 a day. Now you're like, all right, well, that still sounds like a lot of money, Jason. How do I make $800 a day? But you got to ask yourself, would I trade the work that I put into today for $800? Or what's the thing that I do? Like if I go, hey, if I make this phone call, this could be worth 10 grand to my business.
Mhm.
Okay, that was worth my $800 today. Even though it was only one phone call, I did an action towards something that makes that much more money. And I think you got to get out of this idea. And if you're watching this and you're an hourly employee and you're like, well, Jason, no, my boss is never going to pay me $800 an hour. Like I don't pay $800 an hour either. Like at art, you can't work for me and make $800 an hour. But
Yeah.
but what you can do is say, am I making decisions that earn that? Right? Am I
Right.
making decisions that'll help me get there? So again, maybe you just say, I want to make $2,500 for the month. Let's break it way down that way and say, I want to make $2,500 a month. Well, divide that by 30. What's that? That's $83 a day. That might be easier. Like, oh, I can definitely make $83 a day. That's
Yeah.
totally fine. But why not figure out, like, if you figured out how to make $83 a day, can you not figure out how to make $200 a day and then $300 a day and then and like decide how do you keep chunking up your time to say what's more valuable with what I'm spending my time on? So if you set some
Right.
big, giant, crazy, I can do anything goal, like, let me take over the world, I can do this. Do you break it down to say, what's my next goal? So in business, if you're like, hey, I want to run a $1 million business, right? I want to run $1 million a year, which by the way, if you run a business that does over $1 million a year, I was just telling somebody, Holly, this the other day, is that if you run a $1 million a year company, your business brings in $1 million, you are in the 1% of businesses around the world.
Yeah.
1%.
Isn't that
That's massive.
crazy? Yeah.
That's massive, right? So
Yeah.
1% of businesses. So let's break that down by 12 months. Do you know off the top of your head, Holly, how much $1 million a year business brings through the door monthly?
Um,
Not to all
oh, I
put you
wanna
on the
say it's
spot,
100.
like calculating.
I wanna say it's
Here,
about
I'll save you. I'll save you. I'll save you.
150,000.
Well, look,
Oh,
it's
oh,
83,000.
83?
83,000.
$83,000 a year or a
Yeah,
month? Yep,
83,000 a month.
okay.
So if you don't know, you
Yep,
got to get to 83,000. And I know you know this, Holly, because
yeah,
you run a very large business too. But my point
yep,
is when you do this, right? When you do this and you go, okay, as soon as I get to 83,000, now I'm on pace for my $1 million a year. Well, what
yeah,
if you want to do 2 million? Well, now you have to get to $160,000 a month.
yep,
Okay. And then keep stepping it up. And I asked myself, I was like, the other day, I was like, okay, what would it take for me to run a $10 million a year company? Like, what
mhm,
would that number be? What's a
yep,
$10 million a year company? And all of a sudden you break that down and you go, oh, okay, that's over $660,000 a month that I need to be making in order to do that. And all of a sudden you chunk that up and now your brain goes, huh, how do I make $660,000? Right? How do I
yeah.
do that? And what do I make happen? Apparently, our fire alarm has started going off in our building. That's how passionate I am
Yeah,
about
you
talking
are
about this.
hot, hot,
I
hot,
broke
hot.
the building, smoking it today. Looks like it might have gone off. But the idea is if you break this stuff down and you start to pay attention to it, no matter what the dollar amount is, it could be $1,000 a month. It could be 10,000, 100,000, or $1 million a month. I have friends that do $1 million a month, always blow me away. And I just go, what do they do? And they say, I broke it down. And then I said, how much do I need to make a month? How much do I need to make a day? How much do I need to make an hour? How am I effective with my time? And all of a sudden, you start to achieve the goals that you are because you set the big ones, you chunked it down, and you turn it into something digestible. And what ends up happening is that one thing missing is typically the review, but we bonused you with a couple other things, right? We said,
Yeah.
yes, looking back in the review is the most commonly missed thing. But then you got to be the bigger version of yourself when you set the goal. And then you got to break that goal down. And then you got to be relentless on achieving that goal. You guys, this has been the Beautiful Minds podcast. I hope you have an incredible day. I hope your brain is more beautiful than it was when you got here, because that's the goal of Beautiful Minds. And Holly, I really appreciate your insights. And hell yeah, on getting your team to see some incredible insights and
Yeah.
journeys for what they've done and what they've created. So thank you guys for being on today. Appreciate you, and have a great rest of your week. Bye for now. See you guys next time on
Bye,
Beautiful
guys.
Minds.